I wrote 2 sermons. What? CC, yeah. All right, I'll give you 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Wow. I'm about to finish this juice box. You did pick the same sermon that junior high picked, but I do think this one's better than the other one, so that is good enough. But I did for real. You guys believe me that I wrote 2. You believe me. Okay, so we're going to talk about brokenness, everybody. Turn to your neighbor and say, you're broken. And say, but it's okay. Like, reassure them. Tell them it's okay. All right. Hey, so this sermon is based off of a sermon that I gave like 4 years ago at home. I think I maybe was an intern at this time. I don't know. All I remember, all I remember was that I had to preach at home, and like 3 hours before I had to preach, Sam came into the room and he was like, "What do you got for tonight?" Because he likes to help me. And I was like, "Well, I was thinking about this, but I'm kind of stuck." And he kind of gave me that look like, "You don't really have anything here," which is what I needed to hear at that moment. But I did feel very broken in that moment because I remember like crying and being like, "I have to preach like really soon and I have nothing to say." And then it turned out okay. I like pulled something together, but I went back to look at the old notes and I'm like, I did not have a lot. But I'm going to tell you the same sermon again. It's kind of different now, but it's okay. Hey, when I'm talking about brokenness, where I'm getting that from is the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. Have you heard this one before? I'll just refresh your memory. He feeds a lot of people with not a lot of food. And I wasn't trying to make a joke. I was just trying to tell you what happened. And what he does is he takes this bread and he breaks it, and then he gives it to his disciples, and they go feed people, and there's, not a lot of bread, and then a lot of people get fed. And it's this interesting moment of like, Jesus breaks this bread, and it is in the brokenness that like a miracle happens. And so I'm kind of pulling that word brokenness from that story, and we'll go back to that story at the end. But really when I'm talking about brokenness, what I'm meaning is like our neediness, our insecurity, our weakness. The things that make us feel vulnerable, the things that we're not proud about. Like, I'm taking kind of all of those sort of category of things, and I'm kind of wrapping it up, and I'm defining it as brokenness. Because I think brokenness is something that we are taught, maybe not explicitly, but certainly implicitly, to hide. And I remember being in elementary school, and I was in music class. I was not a fan of music class. Some of you probably loved music class. No, you didn't like it. Okay, well, none of us liked music class then, I guess. Okay, it's fine. But one day in music class, the teacher said, "You're going to have a test." And this was before I knew that tests didn't matter in elementary school, and neither did grades. Some of you still don't think they matter now, but we can agree to disagree. But I remember that we were all going to have to get up in front of the class, and we're going to have to sing by ourselves in front of everybody. Yeah, it's pretty traumatizing. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And if you didn't know this about me, I can't sing. I know I seem like someone who could sing, but I can't. Yeah, thank you, Daniel. And so I was like so nervous to do this because essentially, right, it was forcing me, someone who generally likes to appear like I know what I'm doing, and it was forcing me to go up in front of my class and to do something that I knew that I was bad at. And that's just like straight up not fun at all ever. And so I remember having to get up that day and sing, And, I was singing really quiet, and so he's like, you have to sing a little louder, and I did that. And to really make this story seem particularly important, this would be the part where I would say, and then all the kids laughed at me, and they said, you're the worst at singing, and you should be embarrassed, and all of this stuff, right? That something traumatic would happen, and then I would be like, see, that's why we hide our weaknesses. But really, nothing happened. I got up, I sang, nobody else cared. Nobody else cared, whether I could sing or not. And then I sat back down and the day went on as normal. But really, it was this moment that I still remember, and I don't really remember that much of elementary school, because it was this thing I was forced to do that I had spent a lot of time trying to hide. That I am someone who wants to appear like I have it together. I want to get up here and I want to come up and act like I know what I'm saying and I know what I'm doing. I want you guys to like me. I want you guys to think that I'm cool or something. And I don't like showing my brokenness, my vulnerability, my insecurity. That moment then is something I would say that I probably carried with me a lot of my life. And I think that we are conditioned to do this. When you guys apply for jobs, a lot of times some of you will send those to me because you need a reference. And I'm happy to fill them out, but you don't have to send them to me. But I'll fill them out, and usually there's this section, and it'll say what are 3 areas of improvement you have for this candidate, or what are some of their weaknesses? What are some things that they need to work on? And I know what type of things I'm supposed to say. I'm going to do you guys a favor, and I'm going to give you a good recommendation. And so I'm not going to write they're super rude. I wouldn't put them in to work with people at all because they're really rude. I'm not going to say they are so lazy. They're probably going to show up to work late every day. If you want to risk it, go for it. I usually say oh my gosh, they're super friendly, or they're just such a hard worker, or sometimes they're really a perfectionist. They might be afraid to fail. You're just gonna have to tell them it's okay to fail every once in a while. I don't know what I say. I'll have to go read it back. But even then, right? We're supposed to know that we're not really supposed to tell the whole truth. Even in those moments when we're being asked and invited to show our weaknesses, we know that we're supposed to position that and this is a weakness, but it's still kind of a strength. This is a weakness, but it's still kind of a good thing. Even in those moments, right? Even in the moments that we're told no, really, show us your improvements. We still want to position ourselves to make us appear competent, we have it all together. We still, even in those moments, want to make ourselves look good. And I think most of the time I spend time, even now, even as an adult, even sometimes with the people I'm closest with, I still have this temptation that's saying, put your best foot forward. Always show up the best that you can be. Give your best self. Everybody wants to see the parts of you that are bright and shiny and polished and put together. That's what people love. That's what people want. That's what people like. What they don't want are the things that you're not proud of, the things that you're insecure about, are the days that it's not quite working out, are those thoughts you have in your head that you'd want to say out loud because you want to know, but you don't want to say out loud because if people just knew that about you, they might not be as impressed by you. They might not like you as much. But I think what happens when we craft an image like that, we do this all areas of our life, right? We craft an image as we submit college applications. We craft an image in school. We craft an image for our friends, maybe even. We certainly craft an image online. And I think what happens is it creates this sort of unspoken expectation of saying your brokenness is something that you have to hide, that you have to put in a corner, that you have to minimize, that you need to make as small and as insignificant and as hidden as possible. And what I think that creates is the storm inside of us, where shame and insecurity and pain can spin up. And we spend all this time working to present this image on the outside that what it does is it actually just turns in on ourselves, and inside we're torn up. In the quiet moments, we're not okay. When we look in the mirror, we don't feel good. When we compare ourselves to those perfect images everybody else puts out, it hurts. And so we think we're solving the problem, but I would suggest that maybe we're making it worse. But I believe that there's actually a different way of doing things. That yes, that is the cultural norm, that is the societal expectation, but it doesn't have to be the way that we do things. And when Paul is writing, he's writing to a church, and there has been reports that all of these people are coming into this church and they're bragging about all of their accomplishments, all of their sort of the things that they have that make them impressive. And Paul goes, I can play that game too. Like, I can boast too. Except what he starts doing is he starts bragging about all of these bad things that have happened to him. And things that culturally at that time, Paul's a Roman citizen, as a Roman citizen, like, would be shameful for you to say. And so he's saying, like, I have been beaten and I've been put in prison and I've been shipwrecked and people have insulted me and cast me out of places and all of these things. And so he's going on this list and he's like, I can brag too. And then we're supposed to read it and go, oh, this is ironic. Because what Paul is bragging about are all these things that nobody would think were impressive. It would be all of those things that people would know not to talk about. And then he says this, and I think this is such an interesting passage. He says this, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, in order for me to think too much of myself, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. Like, that is really strong language, isn't it? A messenger from Satan to torment me? Like, has anyone said anything remotely close to that? And so he keeps going and he says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away. Sometimes we read about these people in the Bible, or we look at sort of our role models in our life and we think like, they have everything together, like they can do it all. And Paul's going, no. I pleaded with the Lord. I wanted him to remove it. I had this brokenness. I had this weakness. I had this thing that was causing me pain that I wasn't proud of, that I didn't want to be there. And I asked the Lord to take it away. And if we're playing like who's the best Christian game, like Paul probably wins every time. He's this example that we still use today to say like he lived his life for Jesus and he made sure other people could too. But when he asked the Lord to take it away, he gets something else instead. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, Paul says, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And that might not be what we want Paul to say to us. Maybe what we'd want Paul to say to us is like, I prayed to the Lord, and it turns out if you pray enough, God's going to remove that thing that you're insecure about. That's causing you pain. He's going to take it away, and you can be strong again. And Paul says, I didn't get that taken away. Instead, I got a different perspective. And he goes on, he says, when I am weak, then I am strong. We are taught that when you are strong, you are strong. And when you are weak, you are weak. But he flips it and he says, it's actually in my weakness, that's when I'm strong. Why? Because Paul believes that God's grace fills in the gaps. that it is his weaknesses that allow God's grace to come in and fill the gaps. That those are the very moments when he realizes that he must depend on God, that he has to rely on a power outside of himself, that his weaknesses are actually opportunities, they're actually instances where he can see God working in his life because grace fills the gaps, because God's power shines through when human power falls away. And so this is what I believe, that my weakness is a reminder that God works through me. That my weakness is actually a reminder that God works through me. Sometimes we believe that, like, God wants to use my strengths and my gifts and my talents. And I believe that is true. But I think God wants to use all of you, not just part of you. Yeah, he wants to use your strengths. I believe he wants to use your weaknesses. The good things and the bad things, the impressive things and the unimpressive things. That he wants to use it all. And so if that is true, then I think we can be content in our brokenness. Then I think that we can live with our brokenness in a new way. And this is how, I think first, that we befriend our weakness. That we befriend our weakness, that we actually let it out into the light. Why? Because I think your brokenness is most dangerous in the dark. I think your brokenness is most dangerous in the dark. That this practice that we've adopted that says hide away those things, push them down, get them in the darkest corner that you can, that is actually the most dangerous place for them to be. Why? Because it is in that place where you can only hear the voice inside your head that I think more often than not lies to you. That says, if people knew this about you, they wouldn't like you. People saw all of you, they wouldn't be impressed. If they known what happened to you or what you did, they wouldn't love you. And when those things stay in the dark, that is when that voice gets loud. But when we realize that we can actually, like Paul says, it sounds crazy, boast in our weakness, bring it out into the light, that's where we can hear what is true. Sometimes you have to say what you're afraid of so that you can hear what is true. I'm afraid this is true about me, and you can hear somebody say, well, actually, God's grace fills in the gaps. Actually, in your weakness, you're strong. Actually, you don't earn God's love, you already have it. Actually, God wants to use the broken parts and the whole parts of you. I remember, some of you probably know this story. My freshman year of college, I came home. I was home for Thanksgiving. It's a Thanksgiving service we do here. And that year, I came and I was helping kind of get ready for the service that night. And we were doing these cardboard testimonies where you write like something that was hard on one side and how God used it on the other side. And I was writing, like handwriting some of these, and someone said, Gabby, you should do one. And I didn't really want to do one because I had a really rough few months. And so I didn't have anything good to say. And so I literally went home and I didn't know if I was going to write. I didn't know if I was going to do it. And then I just decided to do it. And what I'd written on one side is like feeling more lonely and isolated than ever. And I didn't want to do that because home for Thanksgiving is like the first time everyone comes home from college. And so the last thing I wanted to do was like publicize my failure, or at least that's what it felt like, in front of everybody. And I didn't want to be the one who couldn't do it when all my friends came back and said they were having a good time, and I was like the one that couldn't figure it out, you know? And so that was like the last thing I wanted to say. And I wanted to share that story when I could flip over that sign and say, like, now I'm thriving. I'm the most popular girl in school. Yeah. But I wanted to flip over that sign when it had like a really nice finish, and it didn't. And instead, when I flipped over that sign, all I could write was leaning on God more than ever. Because that was the only thing that was true in that moment. And I was so convinced that when I showed that sign that I was going to feel more shame and I was going to feel more disappointment, and it was just going to be one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, like music class times 10. And instead, when I walked up, when I showed that sign, it was freeing. It felt freeing. That's the best way to describe it. Because I didn't have to spend the rest of my night going up to the people I was seeing for the first time and just going like, yeah, it's going pretty good. I could just be honest in that moment. Everybody knew. It was out there. It was in the light. And instead I could hear encouragement. Instead I could hear what was true. And I don't know if I would have shared that if I hadn't been forced in that like very public way. But I think if we befriend our brokenness, if we say what we're afraid of, what we're so convinced inside of our head is it's going to make us worse, and I think it's actually the opposite, that it makes us feel better. And the second thing is this: bring your brokenness to God. Bring your brokenness to God. I keep thinking there's going to be this day when I feel like a whole complete person. Do you ever feel that? Maybe one point in the future, I'll be the confident enough. Maybe one point in the future, I'll have everything together. Maybe one point in the future, I'll finally figure out this stuff that I've been trying to work through. And then I'll really be good to go. Then I'll really be crushing it. But I think the truth is that we're never gonna not be broken. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think you're ever gonna be that. I don't think you're ever gonna get there. I think there's gonna always be something that's hard. I think there's always gonna be something that's gonna make you feel weak. I think there's always gonna be something that you hear in your voice, in your head, hey, hide this. So if you're always gonna be broken, you might as well let God use it. You might as well bring it to God and let him use it. If there's always gonna be those things in your life that you're not proud of, you might as well let God use it for his glory, to work good out of it. That moment, you know what I've gotten the opportunity to do after that weird cardboard sign thing? I've gotten to sit down with students, and when they tell me that things have been hard, I get to say, well, I've been there too. Well, I've experienced that too. It's not this life-changing, insane thing, but it is God using that moment that was healing for me to then actually maybe help somebody else be a little bit more okay as well. I really believe that brokenness in God's hands is not weakness, but strength. I really believe that this is true. We go back to that breaking of the bread, and when the bread is broken, then the miracle happens. I don't know enough about that story to know for sure that's the theological point that was trying to get across, but I do know that again and again and again that God specifically chooses broken things to make a miracle out of. And we sit here and we tell ourselves that our brokenness is an obstacle, and God's saying it's actually a prerequisite. It's actually a moment that I am more attracted to, that I want to use. Because brokenness in God's hands, it's not weakness, it's strength. Because it's those moments when we finally let go and we let God's power work through us. And we show up in a different way in the world than the rest of the world thinks is okay, but secretly they want to do that too. And we see this most clearly when Jesus is hanging on a cross, when he's dying. It's in that moment when God looks weak. God dies. He's not supposed to die. And all of the people around him are going, see, I knew he wasn't who he said he was, because things wouldn't have ended like this. And it's in the very moment when death occurs, when God's power shows up most gloriously through it. Because God says, I am taking this ultimate moment of my weakness and I am working my way through it, that I bring dead things to life. That God brings dead things to life, and he's still doing it today. What if our brokenness wasn't a way for us to feel shame, and instead it was an avenue to see God's glory? Because I believe I'm sitting in a room with a lot of people who want to be used by God. But I don't think God wants to use the you that you pretend to be. I think God wants to use the you that you actually are. Because he created you that way. And he's not afraid of the broken pieces. In fact, he goes, hey, I want people to see power beyond themselves. And so if you look perfect all the time, where's my power going to come through? So what if we lived like that? What if we lived differently? That we were people who were willing to push our brokenness out in the light and give it to God. I think we would be more free, and I think the people around us would be too. So that's your challenge for the day. And we're going to pray, because I went too long. Jesus, we thank you that you use broken things, that you use things that are not the way that they should be, and then you make them beautiful. And so I just pray for those of us that are sitting in this room and feel like we're the last one that you would use, because we don't bring anything to the table, or we're the last one you'd use because of whatever reason we're giving ourselves, Jesus. And would you just remind us that you're here for each and every one of us, that every one of us gets to be